Thank you, Abhishek, and thank you, Auntie Raylene, as well. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation in Sydney, and I'll tell you here in Brisbane, you definitely do win on the weather front if La Nina has anything to do with it. Look, I'm very grateful to be here and very conscious it's 9 o'clock-ish on a Saturday morning, so I'll do my best to try and kick off the conference with a bang. And you have a really exciting program coming up over the next few days. What we wanted to do, though, before getting into that, where you're getting into the technical detail, was really just start with a bit of a scene setter around the future of work, the future of life, what it means for us as family members, as community members, but also with our practices and working within the world of work that we find ourselves in as well. And when it comes to futures thinking, we do it every day. You think about what it is that you're going to have for dinner. As practice owners, you think about what your next fiscal quarter looks like. But then the practice of what we call foresight or futures thinking as a discipline is still relatively new. And when I think about futures thinking, these two guys here are two of the leading futurists from about 50, 60, 70 years ago. Now, does anyone have any idea who these two people are? I'm hearing some murmurings. So these two people are William Hanna and Joseph Barbera. Now, some people might recognise those names. These guys are the people who created the Jetsons. And when we think about the future, you may think, why are we talking about the Jetsons, Ben? We don't have flying cars. But the Jetsons did get quite a few things right. They got the video phone. They had robot vacuums. We think about the Roomba. We now have smart appliances in our households as well. While we're not taking jetpacks to school like Astro, we are seeing jetpacks, particularly hydrogen-fueled jetpacks, around the traps. Printed food. Everything from the 60-second pizza that you can get from a vending machine right through to how 3D printers are actually making synthetic food in the battle against world hunger. And then, of course, the smartwatch as well. All of these things predicted by William and Joseph. Now, when we think about the Jetsons, we think, all right, well, maybe there is some truth to what they had to say. Let's just remember that George was born in 2022. So maybe flying cars could be coming around sooner than we think if the Jetsons are anything to go by. But when we think about futures thinking and why are we exploring this topic today, there are two key things that I want to flag. The first is it says futures thinking. So it's intentionally talking about multiple futures because we don't know what the future looks like, but we can take trends that we see today, extrapolate them forwards, and think about what multiple alternative futures could look like. And the point of that is to then do what we call backcasting, which is say if that's the future, we work our way backwards to where we are today, and we can pull together a plan or at least make decisions in the knowledge of what our preferred future looks like. And that goes on to my second point, which is that if we just look back over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of disruption. And disruption is the new norm because if the pandemic and when the pandemic subsides fully, we're then going to see other disruptions. We're seeing global geopolitical conflict play out. We're seeing the UK have their own Rudd, Gillard, Rudd, Abbott, Turnbull moment at the moment. And so we're always going to be amidst this disruption. So we can either be passive recipients of that or we can take a greater degree of ownership. And that's why this foresight capability is so important for yourselves as practice and small business owners and working within the health system as well, having an understanding around what's coming and how you can have a greater degree of control into how you get there. And when we think about some of the different innovations that are happening around the world today, it kind of shows us that the future isn't as far away as we might think. So, for example, in the deserts of North Africa and central Mexico, people are using laser scanners to uncover lost cities. In China, they have equal representation of boys and girls in high school, but actually have females making up more than half of the university student population, which is up from what was just a quarter in the 1970s. You guys might like this one. In India, what they've done is they've deployed facial recognition glasses and they uploaded the faces of missing children and tracked down 3,000 missing children in just 4 days. In Melbourne, we have the largest 3D printer in the world, and this printer is capable of making submarines and rockets. In Israel, they're using human fat cells to regenerate new human bones that are 7 times stronger than our biological ones. Now, instant translation could seem like it's far away. This technology is already on the market, and there's instant in-ear translation devices where I can put in what look like headphones, and you can speak to me in another language, and it instantly translates it to English. And so thinking about language being one of the biggest barriers to human progress globally, that will disappear in the lifetime of every single person sitting in this room. And just going a little bit deeper into the medical space as well, technology can read brain scans that diagnose autism at 6 months old, whereas human clinicians generally can't or don't until about 2 years, and they can diagnose Alzheimer's up to 9 years earlier. And then AI is also more effective at spotting hard-to-detect breast cancers and reducing the rate of false positives by 25%. So these are all just really specific innovations that are happening, but they show that there's a lot of hope when it comes to human progress. There's a lot of optimism and opportunity about the future when we think about what's happening already today and then what that could look like moving forwards. But there are 6 things when we think more broadly. We step up, we look horizontally, and we go, well, what are the trends that are driving a lot of this? So 6 key things. I'm conscious, I'm here for a good time, not a long time, so I'm not going to go into the detail of all of this. I do want to talk about 1 or 2 cool things that I think are really interesting for each of these topics with you. So the first one is around some of the demographic changes that we're seeing. Now, globally, we're expecting to peak as a global population in 2064. And then after that, the population will start to decline. And that's because of declining fertility rates. So if we go back to 1950, globally, the average family was having 4.7 children. Now it's around 2.4. And then moving forwards, it's going to be 1.7. So people are having fewer children per family, declining population from 2064 onwards. But if we think a little bit closer to 2030, we're going to have 1 billion more people globally in 2030. What does that mean for Australia, though? Well, quite interestingly, because of the last couple of years, the Australian Centre for Population has actually forecasted that we're going to have 1.1 million fewer people than we'd previously anticipated because of the impact of border closures and skilled migration. So our population growth won't be as aggressive or accelerate to the extent of other countries. When it comes to lifestyle, in Australia, lifestyle is absolutely paramount around what we value and the decisions we make. So you can look over the last couple of 100 years and see how we started out, with a lot of people living in regional areas and then moving towards coastal areas, driven by lifestyle. You can also see, if we think more broadly around things like body modification, I'm talking not just piercings, you can see people, they put that stuff under their skin. But now what we're seeing is things like the jewel eye, where people are actually putting jewellery in and on their eyeballs, or where we're seeing eye whitening drops hit the market. And moving forwards, we're seeing designer babies on the horizon. So where people can genetically modify not just physical characteristics, but also try and influence behavioural characteristics of children as well. As far as technology shifts go, I spoke about 3D printing as far as the ability to print synthetic food, the ability to print rockets and submarines, but there's also the ability to print human organs. And so that's something that's under development at the moment. With regard to climate, energy and resources, we're seeing a lot of organisations within the energy space look at renewables. We're seeing the early shutdown of coal-fired plants. We're seeing car manufacturers coming out and talking about and setting dates for when they'll stop the production of traditional petrol vehicles and exclusively make electronic vehicles. But what we're also seeing is the rise in food technology and synthetic meat, or fake meat. So if you go to Beyond Meats, that's one of these fake meat companies, that's had the highest growth of any company in the .com era. So there's a lot more to come on that front. Trust and transparency. I mean, we only have to look at the last couple of weeks on the news, right? You look at Optus, you look at Medibank. We are going to see a lot more happening around this space of trust. And if we think about cybersecurity, we're only scratching the surface of what's happening now. So into the future, we're already seeing the development of flexible threads or neurotransmitters. So that's a piece of technology. It gets implemented in here, and it means that you can control the lighting in this theatre, or I can work my phone without speaking a word. It's directly transmitting from my brain. But then that also means that someone can hack my brain. So a very interesting conundrum there. A little bit more closer to home that will be sooner rather than later. If we look at autonomous vehicles or driverless cars, it is very likely that a scenario could play out, and this is going to sound a little bit morbid, but whereby someone could be a passenger in an autonomous vehicle, a cyber criminal hacks it and says, I will crush this car unless you pay me $200,000. So people are able to hack into these autonomous vehicles as well. And so there is a lot of great opportunity that comes with technological advancement, but the ethics and how we ensure security and this piece around trust of using that technology is going to be what's paramount. And then finally, the future of work, which is my passion and what I've been asked to go into a little bit more detail with you this morning as well. So when we think about the last couple of hundred of years of work, what we can see right back to the first industrial revolution was where people moved from regional areas to cities for work. So regions and the country densely populated, moving then towards urban areas as we saw manufacturing take off, factories, etc. We then saw the second industrial revolution, which was all about globalization. Then it was more around the evolution and introduction of the internet, and now connected technologies as well with the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0. And even if we look back just over the last 20 years around how has work changed, what's sort of been the rhetoric around ways of working, we can see this shift from the turn of the century, which was like the wellness age. So that's where we started talking about work-life balance, and all of a sudden people wanted to have this work-life balance. They wanted lifestyle. It was more than just climbing the corporate ladder. We then went into the digital age, where it was really around creativity, collaboration. The buzzword was co-design at the time. And then moving into the virtual age, the last couple of years, how we've leveraged technology to drive flexibility and remote ways of working, and then moving into the personalised and intelligent age. So if you think about, for example, your social media, Instagram, Facebook, any medium you might be on, if you're having a conversation with a friend, you might be talking about a particular product. 5 minutes later, there's an advertisement for that product on your phone. That's happening today. That will then extend into the workplace and infiltrate all parts of our lives as well. And so there are a range of disruptions that are shaping work. I spoke about some of these in terms of the context of the future more broadly, but absolutely shaping what we mean and how we go about doing our jobs. And so one is around automation. The thing that I would flag here is that we had the budget come down a couple of days ago, and the budget forecasted a potential recession or global-like recession conditions in terms of our economy. And what we see in times of recession or recession-like conditions is organisations and economies invest in automation, because it's their way of doing more with less and still being able to achieve productivity without the people power behind it. So we can expect that automation will increase over the next couple of years. But the key thing here is that a lot of people think that the robots are coming to take our jobs. And that's fundamentally untrue. In Australia, 1/3 of workers think that in 5 years' time, their job will no longer exist because of technology and automation. That number's actually around 5% by 2030. So 5% of jobs may not exist that exist today by 2030 because of automation. But there is actually a net increase in jobs as a result of technology. So more jobs get created than that go away. But what it does mean is that our jobs will change and the skills that we need will evolve because of technology. There's the distrust in institutions as a really big disruptor here. And so what that means is emerging generations are increasingly looking to move away from the traditional large organisation. We're also seeing with things like fake news, we're seeing Trump, Brexit, all these signals and signs that show that there's a degree of activism that's coming from the workforce and society more broadly as well. I've mentioned hyper-personalised experiences, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But then we're also seeing the rise of the gig economy, so contractors, freelancers, and a real big increase in part-time workers across the economy as well, as workers increasingly want more choice and control in what they do for work and how they go about doing it. The changing demographics, in the workforce, we have 5 generations coexisting, and by 2025, millennials will be not only the dominant demographic in the workforce, but will be the largest proportion of managers in the workforce as well. So that's going to be a very interesting dynamic that plays out. Low wage growth, our current market around high inflation is absolutely driving decisions around careers and career choices. So the number one thing that is attracting someone to work at an organisation or leave is money, which traditionally isn't actually the number one factor, but it is today. And in a study around working from home, it was found that the number one benefit of working from home in 2022 was not the flexibility or the work-life balance or the cooking healthy dinners, spending time with kids, it was saving money. So again, this is really having significant impacts on people's decisions around work. And then finally, there's the Great Resignation that's been playing out, which is essentially a term the media coined to say that people are moving jobs more frequently than they have in the past. And what we've seen in the current market, we have near record low unemployment. It's recently gone up slightly, but record low unemployment. We also have more job vacancies than job seekers. So there are more available jobs than there are people actually looking for work. And so what these conditions mean is that it's an employee-driven market. The employees have the balance of power. Previously, they might have applied for 5 jobs, got 1 offer. Now they apply for 5 jobs, they get 5 offers. And so employees are dictating a lot of this change and shift around expectations within the world of work. But we're here to talk a little bit more, not just about today, but about the future. I'm conscious we're sitting relatively early in the morning and I've given you a lot of data. So I'm going to hold back on the numbers and I want to give you some plausible future forecasts around if we take what we're seeing today in the world of work and extrapolate that forwards, what are some visible signs of what the future could look like, say in 2030? The first one is the neighbourhood business district. So at the moment, what we've seen is central CBD tenancy going down slightly. Organisations are looking to rationalise floor space in CBD, so they're taking up fewer floors within a building, but that means there's a more diverse mix of tenants coming in. But what that also means is that organisations are basing themselves outside the CBD and increasingly will moving forwards. And so this will see these satellite outer suburban areas and precincts really take off in what is the neighbourhood business district. Mobile meeting rooms will be another one, the evolution of the autonomous vehicle. So kind of think about a bus, but without all the seats and have whiteboards and lounges. And so instead of someone, say, taking a flight from Sydney to Melbourne, them and their team might get in a mobile meeting room for 3 hours and have a productive call or meeting or workshop while they're transiting between cities as an autonomous vehicle takes them there. This is one of my personal favourites. I'm a little bit biased, but doggy daycare. So if we think about the last couple of years, Australia actually had a declared dog shortage. And so we've seen the rise of people with pets in Australia. We've seen mental health and wellbeing over the last couple of years rise to the top of the agenda as well. And what that means is that people have developed this codependency with their pets while they've been in lockdown working from home. And we know that there's a really strong correlation between pets and positive mental health outcomes. So people will want to take their pets more into the office, and we're seeing a lot of organisations start to implement those policies. And I think as part of that, we'll also see doggy daycare take off. So if anyone's an entrepreneur who wants to invest, that's where I'd put my money at the moment. As far as a personalised worker value proposition goes, I intentionally say worker and not employee because the notion of the 9 to 5 permanent full-time employee will not exist in 2030. Some people suggest that in 2030, 80% of the workforce will be gig workers or contractors. And if that seems like a lot, today, take Google, they have more temporary than permanent staff working for them as well. So this whole notion of temporary employment is taking off. So that's why I say worker and not employee. And when I say a personalised worker value proposition, think about, for example, a health insurance extras package. So I might say I want optical. Of course, I'm going to say I want optical. I want physio, but I don't want chiro. That will be like the perks that we offer our people. I want my wellness benefit, I want my learning allowance, but I'm not concerned about this other benefit. So people are able to pick and choose the perks and benefits they want as part of their employment package. Robo-recruitment is another one. So if you look at some organisations, Qantas, Woolies and others, some of their first round recruitment interviews are actually done by AI today. Now, if we move that forwards into the future, what I think will actually happen is the ability for AI to proactively predict when a vacancy may come about and then be able to provide candidates for that. So what I mean by that is, I'm working in an organisation. If someone that my AI comes to me and says, Ben, we think in 2 months' time you're going to have a vacancy for a business analyst, and we've already gone through LinkedIn and here are 5 profiles we think you should interview for. So that's an example of how technology and AI will influence the recruitment and sourcing space. And then finally, purpose over profit. So this is something, again, that's already happening today, but this will become much, much more prevalent into the future. So we're already seeing individuals make decisions around who they will and will not work for based on the organisation's social agenda. But moving forwards, we'll start to see people talking about their really enviable ESG, environmental and sustainability program, and carbon footprint as a way to attract people, giving environmentally friendly incentives for employers that display the right practices. This will absolutely become part of the agenda. And some futurists actually suggest that in future, organisations will be reporting on social impact and environmental impact rather than profit to their boards as well. And so finally, just to bring that back to, well, how does all of this influence what workers want? In today's market, what we've seen in 2022, workers very clearly want 3 things. So they want to be paid fairly for the work that they do, they want work-life balance, and they want to work with good people. So those 3 things, irrespective of seniority, irrespective of generation, part-time, full-time, city worker, regional worker, those 3 things came out on top out of 29 items. So it's very clear that that's what workers want today. How that might play out moving forwards into the future, there's a lot more of a push around increasing transparency with remuneration. How do you determine how much I get paid? How do you determine what my bonuses or incentives are? Being really clear around that, and you would have seen or potentially might have seen the government talking about at the moment abolishing pay secrecy clauses because that contributes to the gender pay gap. So up until now, it has been a dismissible offence in some organisations to talk about your salary. That is absolutely going. We're seeing a push around employer-provided mental health and wellbeing services. And what I mean by that is that Australian workers are increasingly looking to their employer to be the #1 source of accessing mental health and wellbeing support services. Not necessarily their GP, their employer. And the time of day that they most look for or seek this support is at 9 p.m. at night. And so what that means is a real push towards a digital 24/7 mental health and wellbeing support service. And then I also said the third one was around people wanting to work with good people. How do you know if you're going to be working with good people through an interview process? You talk to a recruiter from HR, you talk to the practice manager who might be your boss, but do you get to talk to the people on the floor who are going to be your at-level peers and colleagues? So that's going to form more a part of interviews. But even more than that, when you hire someone for your practice, you generally ask for a referee on what they're like to work for or work with. We're going to see the reverse increasingly happen, where people you're interviewing will ask for you to give them a referee check. What is it like to work for you as a manager or a boss? It's already starting to happen now, and that will continue to happen into the future. And then a couple of other things, maybe not as relevant for this group, but we are seeing a big push around work from anywhere policies and the remote working piece. Skills passports, which are ways to collect credentials across multiple employers. It's something the government in Australia is looking at now. As I said, employees demanding that organisations take a bigger stand on social issues, and then also greater support, sustained support for working from home. And even in the healthcare setting, I do a lot of work with hospitals. While the whole work from home debate is a little bit far removed from their world, it still is very, very relevant from the perspective of their future pipeline of talent. People entering university are looking at other industries, looking at other opportunities that they could go to, and they're actually going, you know what? I would rather the ability to say work from home and have greater flexibility and work in X industry rather than go in as a nurse. And so what I mean by that is we need to continue to still challenge ourselves and think, how are we going to evolve our profession? If it's not flexible and hybrid working, what is it that we can really hold true as our emerging value proposition for our employees, and how do we ensure it stays contemporary and future fit as well? So that's all from me. Enjoy the rest of your Congress in the next few days, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for that.